Hey, what's going on, guys? Like Butter here, back with another build video. Today I'm going to be showing you my DPS rifle build. This is a very glass canny type of build where you're meant to do large amounts of damage but can't take much damage in return. So this build is really just meant for group play. If I was going to make some adjustments to this for solo, I would put a little bit more tankiness on. But you're going to see in the end of the video, this build can be used solo as well. Since we got through heroic mission, I can do almost all the heroic content as long as you're just really careful. So I want to show you guys my rifle build. Now, this took a while for me to put together. I've tested so many different variations of the build, and I honestly think that this version of the build is very close to perfect. And I'm going to explain to you guys kind of all the pieces I'm using, why I'm using it, etc. Okay, so starting off, you do want to use the sniper specialization. This comes with the TAC 50C rifle, which is a very powerful sniper rifle. If you guys don't know, this is the sharpshooter weapon. And so you do want to use the sharpshooter tree because it has a lot of things in there that are built around rifles and sniper rifles, including like extra headshot damage for snipers and rifles. So you definitely want to use that class for this build. It's also arguably one of the most, highest DPS versions of the specializations as well. It's got a lot of DPS in that tree. So you guys will see that. Just make sure you pick the rifle and the marksman rifle damage in the tree as well, and you should be good to go. And for the first weapon, I tested so many different weapons here. I bounced around plenty of times. I decided that the baker's dozen happens to be the best in slot for me personally. For this playstyle, I think the baker's dozen is as good as it gets. Now, you can get the baker's dozen from the seasons. You can also find it from targeted loot. If you go target loot rifles, it'll drop. It is the named version of the M1A, the classic M1A. Now, the classic M1A is honestly one of the best rifles in the game. It has incredibly high damage for kind of the trade-off of having a bit of a smaller magazine, and that smaller magazine kind of gets made up for with perfect lucky shot. So this dropped and it was very good. I ended up rolling the crit damage, so it's very close to god roll. Max headshot damage, 14 out of 15% rifle damage. So if you can get one of these, it is very strong. So perfect lucky shot. Magazine capacity is increased by 30%. That is one of the most important parts. Missed shots from cover have a 100% chance to return to the magazine. That means that you can go for more headshots. Now, at first when I read this, I was like, oh, that's not that good, because you're basically kind of making or using a talent where you're assuming that you're going to miss shots. Well, I started to learn after testing with it more and more. What this kind of allows you to do is it kind of allows you to go for more headshots because, missing isn't a big deal. If you miss a headshot and you're in cover, essentially the bullet just never happened. It's very good. And, I don't have the greatest aim ever. There are some of you out there that probably have such good aim that you don't need to use this. If that's the case, then I would go with maybe an M1A with Ranger. You could do a MK17. I was testing an MK17 with Boomerang quite a lot. There are a lot of options here that you can use for rifles between the M1A, the MK17. Maybe you want to use something like a SIG. I don't know. There's a lot of options. So whatever feels most comfortable for you. For me personally, the baker's dozen just seems to be the best because it hits very hard. And like I said, you can be a little more reckless for headshots. And I think that's really good. So that's kind of what it rolled with, and hopefully you guys get a good one too. For my secondary weapon, I am using the Nemesis, which is a exotic sniper rifle. There are like plenty of ways that you can get this after you've obtained it at least once. That means like, target loot, you'll see it drop from target looting a lot, especially when there's sniper rifles in the dark zone. But you do have to do the quest first. There's plenty of videos out there that show you how to do the quest for the Nemesis. I heard it was recently bugged, but I think I could be wrong. I think they fixed that, but if not, they will fix it soon. And what the talent does is basically it is Widowmaker Sniper from Overwatch. You charge the shot up, and once it hits 100%, you're going to be doing 100% more damage. So this allows you to hit headshots for a lot of damage. You'll be seeing me hit for anywhere between 11 to 12 million damage on headshots when I crit, which obviously is really good. Now, marksman rifle builds, like if you do like an Aces hybrid, it's going to probably do more than that, but the main attraction of this build is the rifle. So, for your pistol slot, you can use a pistol, you can use a shotgun, you can use whatever you want. I tend to use the shotgun just for fun, but you guys can do, whatever you like. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty of the gear. Now, I am using the Coyotes Mask. This is an exotic mask that you get from level 35 in the season pass. If you guys don't know how seasons work, you basically get like what some people would call a battle pass. Now this isn't the season 1 pass. If you get Warlords in New York, it gives you essentially the pass, or the battle pass for the first season. You guys go here and you hit escape, you can see it here. And you go over here and it'll say season 1 active, and throughout all the rewards, once you get to level 35, that's going to give you the Coyote Mask, and it's going to be random drops as well, like random values there. Now, unfortunately, this is the only way to obtain this mask currently. They said they plan to tie it to the Coyote boss later down in the future once the season's over, so it's going to go back into the loot pool. But as of right now, the only way to get this mask is to get it from the season 1 rewards track. So if you have the DLC, you will have this rewards track, and it'll be very good for you guys to kind of go for that. And it is very, very strong. Now, if you don't know what the Coyotes Mask does and why it fits into this build so well, Pack Instincts. You and all allies gain a bonus based on the distance of the last enemy you hit. So that means you shoot an enemy from a certain range, you're going to give you and your entire team different bonuses depending on the range of that enemy. So from 0 to 15 meters, so really close range, you're going to give your whole team 25% critical hit damage. From 15 to 25 meters, you're going to give people in your group plus 10% critical hit damage and plus 10% critical hit chance. And then from 25 meters plus, you're going to give the entire team and yourself 25% critical hit chance. So depending on the scenario, you're going to be able to buff your team in different ways. And you're going to be able to see it by this logo here that you're going to see pop up once you see the gameplay. You will see that depending on where that logo is highlighted, if it's highlighted on the bottom side, it means you hit them from close. If it's in the middle, it means you hit the middle. And if it's on top, it means that you hit them from the furthest range. And that's the buff that is active. This is incredibly strong because I can't stress enough with how hard this game is ever since Gear 2.0 and Title Update 8. This is very strong because you're giving your entire team damage, and there are so many build opportunities around critical hits in this game now that this is a very, very good bonus, and it is very strong for the team. So that's why I run this exotic mask, and most likely you're going to have other people running the exotic chest piece, so you don't need to worry about that, and that will allow you to kind of be a little more aggressive. For my chest piece, I use a Providence Defense chest piece, and the reason I chose this is because although there is a named version of the Providence chest piece, which is called the Sacrifice here, which has perfect glass cannon on it, I don't think perfect glass cannon is a good talent. I think the AI are just doing way too much damage for you to be taking 60% extra damage. You're going to be getting melted so fast that your healer is never going to have a chance to heal you. And that's a problem because you're hurting the entire team, because yeah, you're going to be doing 30% more damage, but you're also not doing any damage if you're down, right? So I choose to just have the regular Providence defense chest piece with Overwatch. After staying in cover for 10 seconds, increases you and your allies' total weapon damage and skill damage by 12% as long as you remain in cover or in a cover-to-cover move. Well, since you're going to be using a long range build and you're going to be very squishy, you're going to want to stay in the back, which means you're going to be in cover almost all of the time. And being able to be in cover, you're giving your entire team 12% skill damage and weapon damage. This is very, very good for team synergy once again. It's just very strong. So I got some decent rolls here. You usually want as much crit damage or crit chance that you can get on your gear, but you want to pay attention to how much crit chance you stack, because remember, 60% is the crit chance cap. So if you're close to 60%, having like something like the Coyotes Mask is going to be useless unless you were using like an SMG build where you're only going to be doing damage from within, 0 to 15 meters. That'd be different. Then you can go for crit cap because you're most likely never going to be shooting outside of that range. So you can just get full, value out of that crit damage. But for this build, you definitely don't want to go that high for crit chance. So I definitely recommend being careful about this. Don't like stack too much crit chance. You want like a good balance between crit chance, and once you hit that crit chance that you want, then everything else goes into crit damage, headshot damage, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I'm using for my chest piece. So for my holster, you can do a couple different things here. I decided to use the Seska Viroba. I think that's how you say that. I don't know. Which is essentially, it's a god roll holster, and it gives 10% crit chance, max weapon damage, max armor regeneration. Armor regeneration is so good this update, and it doesn't scale off your percent armor, so you can get just as much value out of armor regeneration in a DPS build than you can in a tank build. So yeah, I have armor regeneration here, which I ended up rolling max, which is really good. And of course, I rolled crit damage on the bottom here. You can roll headshot damage if you really, really want, if you're very confident in hitting consistent headshots. But I tend to stack a lot of crit damage in this build. All right, so let's go to the backpack. Now, this backpack is a named item that you're going to want to get. It is called the Gift. Remember, when it comes to any named items, the way you get those items is to target loot the specific brand or the specific weapon archetype that it is associated with. So for example, the Gift is a Providence defense brand set named item, so that's where you're going to farm to get that. Now this piece, I mean, it's a very good one. Unfortunately, it has hazard protection on it. Hazard protection is okay, but since you're so squishy, you much rather have something else here. You could go a red stat. You could even go health and stack a little more health if you wanted to. Hazard protection isn't great, but I really can't complain. It rolled with a decent amount of crit chance. So yeah, this is kind of just what I'm using. Is there a better version of it out there for me? Absolutely. We'll probably eventually farm for that once we're kind of filling in pieces to make the builds as best they can possibly be. But this is essentially what you're going to use. So, for the Providence pieces, you get headshot damage, crit chance, crit damage. These are all three very, very strong stats for the specific build that we're working with. Perfect Vigilance rolls on it, increases total weapon damage by 25%. Taking damage disables this buff for 3 seconds. So essentially, what's going to happen is you're going to be up, you're going to be doing damage. Once you get shot, you're going to kind of go down behind cover, let the aggro reset, and let your buff come back up, and then you can poke back up and you can continue doing damage. And the idea is when you have your tank and when you have your other players kind of pulling aggro and they're using skills and that kind of stuff, with all that madness going on, you can kind of just stay in the back and just absolutely drill for maximum damage. So, like I said, if you really wanted to use perfect glass cannon in this build, like you're confident enough where you're not going to be constantly dying, you could do it. But like I said, I play in a group, and when you play in a group, you definitely, like, I value giving the entire team 12% skill damage and 12% weapon damage over giving myself 30% extra damage and taking 60% more damage as well, So That's definitely something that you kind of have to choose there and kind of make that decision. So if I'm sure it can fit in this build. Say you get a god roll sacrifice and you want to try and make it work, hell yeah, do it up. Um, and for my gloves, this is where there's options here. So I like to use the Providence gloves. They came with headshot damage and crit, 11.1 crit damage. Some people right now in this kind of meta, they're just using contractor gloves on everything. Now, the reason for that is because 11% damage to armor is multiplicative and it is very, very strong. But in my opinion, using an LMG brand set on a build that's not using an LMG, even if it is a little more damage, it just bothers me. I don't know why. It kind of makes me cringe. But some people really just want the highest amount of damage in the most efficient way, so they're going to run these contractor gloves. But you got to remember you're giving up a slot here. So you're not getting any bonus from a brand set because you're not going to be using LMG damage here. And you are giving up one attribute slot for 11% damage to armor. Is it worth it? Well, you got to make that decision. But for me personally, I like using the Providence gloves for the 10% headshot damage and 15% critical hit damage. So, it's close, right? So you're essentially trading 10% headshot damage and 15% critical hit damage for 11% armor damage. What's better? I guess it depends, because only some enemies have armor, so that's kind of the decision you got to make. And most of the time I'm like picking off enemies that don't have armor. They specifically made a lot of enemies that don't have armor, and those are usually the enemies that I focus first to kind of get them out of the way, because they all do a lot of damage this patch, right? So in theory, you kind of want to get the lowest health enemies out of the way first, because that reduces the amount of damage you and your team are like taking in. So for me personally, I like to use the Providence gloves. Now, these knee pads are a must-have in any rifle build. Some people are even using these knee pads outside of rifle builds. They're not even using rifles, but they are so incredibly strong that you pretty much have to use it almost in any build. And the reason for that is because these named knee pads roll with 15% damage to target out of cover, which is insane. That is absolutely bonkers. And this will drop from the Overlord armaments. Like if you go and target farm it, it'll drop as a named item. This one came pretty good, 12.7% weapon damage. I had a friend, Smoke, gave these to me, so I was pretty thankful for that. And those dropped really fast. We didn't even have to farm for it for that long. But it's going to be really hard to get a better version of these knee pads. So trust me, that 15% damage to targets out of cover will have you doing a lot more damage, and it fits in the build perfectly because it's giving you 10% rifle damage as well. So definitely go for the Fox's Prayers for sure. And then for my skills, these are very important, but this is going to be dependent on your team composition or if you're playing solo or what. I like using the decoy because obviously the decoy pulls aggro off me and allows me to not get focused. And since I'm not getting focused, I can do maximum damage with vigilance. And I also like to use the Stinger Hive because even when you're not speccing into any skill damage or skill tiers, the Stinger Hive is absolutely insane and does a lot of damage and applies bleed for the entire team. So if you have teammates using Vindictive and stuff, it's really strong. But if you're playing solo, you could switch this out for a Reviver Hive. I really don't like doing that because, in my opinion, like, you should try really hard not to die, and that skill is going to keep you from getting knocked down. There's going to be a lot of situations where you get knocked down and your Revive Hive drops down and then it gets EMP'd or it gets damaged and it blows up. And then in my eyes, you're basically just not even using a skill, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just to have a look at the stats and we're talking about weapon modding. You can put crit chance on pretty much all of these, depending on how much crit chance you want. For me personally, since you are using the Coyote Mask and sometimes you are going to be getting 25% crit chance buffs when you're hitting from a really long range, I tend to run about 47% critical hit chance. Now you can lower this if you really want to get the maximum value out of that. But what I tend to notice is a lot of times I'm getting the close buff, which is the 25% crit damage, or I'm getting the medium range buff, which is obviously going to give you 10 crit chance, 10 crit damage. So I like to kind of float around the 47% crit chance mark, because you do got to remember the mask. You don't ever feel like it's a waste because the mask is buffing the entire team, not just you. But you can kind of choose and mess with this to see what you like. I think having close to 50% crit chance is really, really good. That's kind of just what I roll. So obviously, if Coyotes Mask procs long range, I'm going to technically be a little bit over the crit chance cap, which is a little bit wasteful, but in my opinion, it kind of makes up for it for how often you're getting that 25% crit proc and also the 10 crit damage. So you got to make this decision. It's totally up to you. But that's kind of just what I like to roll with. And I run 137.9% critical hit damage as well. That will obviously vary depending on how much crit damage you are stacking. Obviously not having armor damage here is kind of sad. If I did want to get a little bit of armor damage, I could use the contractor gloves. But personally, this is kind of just what I like to run. It feels good. You know, I really like it, and I think this build is very strong, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this build video. There's a lot of different ways that you could tweak this build if you feel like you're a little too squishy. If you wanted to do solo, I'm gonna make different variations of the build for people who want to play solo and do certain different content. But for the most part, this is pretty solid, and I'm pretty happy with the way that it came out. So I'm going to show you guys some gameplay. This is from me just playing solo with this exact build. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed, be sure to drop the video a like. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know if you have a different version of this build that you want to share. I'm always open for suggestions. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time. All right, take care, everybody.
You like a challenge, right? See that button? If you push it, I'll give you a present.
Let's see what you got. These dumbasses are coming right up to me. I'm gonna shoot you now.
All right, Rhodes. Show us what you got.
I'm on it, Kelso. Should have this nut cracked in no time, thanks to Isaac. You really don't deserve this kind of power. You really don't.
Weak points exposed. Connection interrupted. Connection reestablished. Scan results. Files found. 1.